I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of a CVS in Burbank, staring at a pregnancy test I had no business buying, when my phone buzzed with a text from my husband that would change everything. It wasn't a dramatic text, not in the way you'd imagine. It was just a simple, almost playful message asking if I wanted him to pick up sushi for dinner and that he was running late from the office. He signed it with a little heart emoji, the same one he always used. And sitting there, in the stale air of my leased Honda, the test still unopened in my lap, that little heart felt like a punch to the gut. Not because of the text itself, but because of the deep, gnawing pit in my stomach that told me I had absolutely no right to be angry at him for anything. I had been living a lie for the better part of 6 months, a beautiful, intoxicating, soul-crushing lie. And that day, that ordinary Tuesday afternoon, was the day the beautiful part started to rot from the inside out. My name is Nora, and I'm 34. I'm a graphic designer for a mid-size marketing firm in downtown Los Angeles. My husband, Alex, is a structural engineer. We had been together for 11 years, married for 8. We were the poster children for a certain kind of stable, comfortable love. We had a cute house in the valley with a lemon tree in the backyard, a rescue dog named Gouda, and a shared Netflix account where our continue watching row was a graveyard of shows we promised we'd finish together. We were the couple that other couples described as solid. We didn't fight, not really. We communicated, we supported each other. We had a standing date night every Friday at a little Italian place on Ventura Boulevard. It was a good life, a life I was supposed to be happy in. I was happy, or at least I had convinced myself I was, until I realized that being happy wasn't the same as being alive. It started with a client. His name was Julian. He ran a boutique architecture firm and hired our company to redesign his brand identity. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair, and a tan that looked like he spent his weekends sailing, which he did. He had this deep, easy laugh, and a way of looking at you that made you feel like the only person in the room. He was everything Alex was not. Not better, not more, just different. Alex was solid and predictable. Julian was a whirlwind. He was spontaneous, intense, and dripped with a kind of dangerous confidence that I had never been exposed to. When he stood too close to me during a presentation, pointing out a detail on the mock-up, I felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He smelled like expensive cologne and coffee. It was a scent that invaded my dreams. The affair wasn't some grand, planned seduction. It was a slow, insidious creep. It started with late-night emails about the project that turned into texts about music and movies. It was a coffee meeting that lasted 3 hours and turned into a walk along the LA River. It was one of those increasingly long walks that led to him kissing me against the concrete wall of his apartment building, his hands in my hair, while the world hummed on, completely indifferent to the fact that I was about to torch my entire existence. The guilt was immediate, a cold, sharp stab, but the thrill of it was louder. It drowned out the guilt for a long time. Julian made me feel seen in a way I hadn't realized I was craving. He'd ask me what I was thinking, and he'd actually listen, not just wait for his turn to speak. He'd make me laugh until my stomach hurt. When I was with him, I wasn't just Alex's wife, or a designer at a firm, or someone's daughter. I was just Nora. Wild, spontaneous, interesting Nora. The Nora I had forgotten about in the comfortable fog of my marriage. The first few months were a fever dream of secret rendezvous and passionate, selfish encounters. I became a master of deception. I'd tell Alex I had a late meeting and go to Julian's sleek, minimalist apartment in Century City. It felt like stepping into another life. His place was all glass and steel, with a view of the city lights that made me feel like I was floating. It was the polar opposite of our cozy, cluttered house filled with our shared history. Alex's house was where I stored my memories. Julian's apartment was where I went to escape them. I'd come home, climb into bed next to Alex, and he would roll over, smell the unfamiliar cologne on my neck, and just say, "You smell like the office." He didn't suspect a thing. Why would he? I was his Nora. His solid, predictable, happy Nora. and I hated myself for how easily I could just lie. But a few weeks before that day in the CVS parking lot, things with Julian started to shift. The romance was fading, replaced by something grittier and more demanding. The texts became less frequent, and when they did come, they were increasingly possessive. He'd ask who I was with, where I was, what I was wearing. He stopped asking me about my day and started interrogating me about my marriage. He became obsessed with the details. Does he still touch you, Nora? Does he still kiss you? Tell me. He'd whisper in the dark, his voice a jealous rasp. He wanted to know if I had told Alex about him. I hadn't, and I had no intention of it. This was my secret, my escape, and I wasn't ready for it to become a reality that could destroy my life. Julian didn't like that. He started getting angry, his eyes turning cold in a way that scared me. He'd tell me I was a coward, that I was stringing him along, that I was just using him for excitement while I clung to the safety of my husband. He was right, of course. I was doing exactly that. But hearing him say it out loud with such scorn made my stomach turn. That morning, I had woken up with a headache and a wave of nausea so powerful I barely made it to the bathroom.
I'd chalked it up to the stress of juggling two lives. But as the days passed, the nausea persisted, and a terrifying, creeping certainty began to form in the back of my mind. I was meticulous with my birth control, but I wasn't perfect. No one is. The thought of being pregnant had sent a cold shock through my system. It was the final, irreversible line in the sand. I couldn't be having Julian's baby. The universe couldn't be that cruel. I had to know. So I'd skipped out of work, claiming a dentist appointment, and drove to the farthest CVS I could think of, as if the distance would make the results less real. So there I was, in the driver's seat, a cheap plastic stick in my hand that held the potential to shatter every carefully constructed lie I had built. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Alex. Hey, did you see the email about the block party this weekend? Mrs. Henderson is organizing it. Another piece of our mundane, perfect life. I felt tears prick my eyes, not from sadness, but from a profound and overwhelming sense of despair. I was standing at a precipice, and I had no idea which way to jump. I had to take the test. I had to know. I shoved the phone into my purse, walked into the fluorescent-lit hell of the store, and bought a bottle of water and a pack of gum to go with the test, as if I was just a normal woman doing normal errands. The cashier, a bored teenage girl with blue hair, didn't even look at me. The test took 3 minutes. I sat on the toilet in the store's cramped single-stall bathroom, watching the little timer on my phone count down. It felt like an eternity. Every second was a lifetime of decisions and regrets. I thought about Alex. I thought about our wedding day, the way he looked at me like I had hung the moon. I thought about the life we had planned, the kids we talked about having, the backyard barbecues and the holidays. I thought about the quiet, beautiful peace of our marriage. And then I thought about Julian. The heat of his skin, the intensity in his eyes, the way he made me feel so alive, even as he was slowly draining the life out of me. I was playing a game with fire, and I was about to get burned. The phone buzzed, signaling the timer was up. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the test. I took a deep breath, trying to brace myself, to prepare for the worst. I turned the stick over. The little window held 2 unmistakable pink lines. Positive. The air left my lungs in a rush. I was pregnant, and I had absolutely no idea whose it was. A sob escaped my throat, a raw, guttural sound that echoed in the tiny, sterile room. I was utterly and completely trapped in the mess I had made. I had to tell someone. I had to do something. But I was frozen, paralyzed by the sheer weight of the catastrophe I had engineered. I felt like an actress trapped on a stage where the play was a tragedy, and I didn't know my lines. I was Nora the wife, Nora the liar, and now Nora the mother of an unknown child. My world, which had been spinning so precariously, had finally, completely come off its axis. The drive home from that CVS parking lot is a blur of white-knuckled fear and red taillights. I remember the sun was starting to set, painting the San Fernando Valley in that hazy, golden LA light that usually made me feel like I was living in a movie. That day, it just felt like a dirty yellow filter over a crime scene. I don't know how I made it back to our house without getting into an accident. I kept seeing those two pink lines flash in my mind, burned into the back of my eyelids every time I blinked. They weren't just a positive result. They were an indictment. They were a glowing, undeniable confession of my infidelity, one that I was now physically carrying inside my body.
My hands were still trembling on the steering wheel as I pulled into our driveway, the familiar sight of our home, the white picket fence we'd painted together, the rose bushes Alex had planted for our 5th anniversary, suddenly looking like the set of a horror movie. It wasn't my sanctuary anymore. It was the place where my lies lived. When I walked through the front door, Gouda, our golden retriever, came bounding up to me, his tail wagging furiously. He was oblivious. He didn't care that his owner was a fraud. He just wanted his dinner and a belly rub. I knelt down to pet him, burying my face in his warm fur, and I let the tears come. Not the loud, wailing kind, but the silent, terrible tears that feel like they're being wrung out of your soul. I stayed there on the floor of the entryway for a long time, just sobbing into the dog's neck, listening to the tick of the grandfather clock in the living room and the distant hum of the refrigerator. It was so quiet, so painfully, achingly quiet. A quiet that was punctuated by the sound of Alex's key turning in the lock. I scrambled to my feet, wiping my face with the back of my hand. I could already feel the telltale puffiness around my eyes. There was no hiding it. He walked in, looking tired but cheerful, holding a plastic bag of Thai takeout from our favorite place. He had listened to me. He'd thought I wanted sushi, but he'd remembered I'd been craving Thai on Monday. That was Alex. He always remembered the little things. He always paid attention. It was one of the reasons I had fallen in love with him, and right now, it was the very thing that was making my heart feel like it was being ground into dust. "Hey, babe," he said, kissing me on the forehead. He paused, his brow furrowing. "Your face is all red. Have you been crying? Are you feeling okay?" He put the takeout down on the whole table and placed a cool hand on my cheek. It felt so kind, so genuine, that I almost broke down again. "I'm fine," I said, my voice sounding hollow and foreign to my own ears. "Just a long day. Stress at work. You know how it is." I lied. It came out so easily. It was terrifying how naturally the lies flowed now. They had become a second language to me, a dialect of deceit that I spoke more fluently than the truth. He nodded, accepting my explanation without question, and headed into the kitchen to get plates. He was so trusting, so utterly, devastatingly trusting. And I was about to poison that trust with something that no amount of couples therapy could ever cure. Over dinner, I sat across from him at our little kitchen table, and I watched him eat his pad thai. He was telling me a story about a problem at the office with a blueprint for a new parking structure downtown, something about load-bearing columns. In the old days, I would have listened, asked questions, pretended to be interested in the architecture. Now I just stared at the little tick he had when he chewed, the way his jaw moved, the shape of his hands as they held his chopsticks. I was looking at him like he was a ghost, a remnant of a life I had already started to destroy. I was trying to figure out how to tell him, "Hey, honey, I'm pregnant. I don't know if it's yours or my lover's. I've been sleeping with a client for 6 months. Oh, and I think he's kind of unhinged." You can't just drop that into casual conversation. After dinner, I told him I had a headache and wanted to take a bath. It was the truth, but it was also an excuse to get away from him. I couldn't look at him anymore. I filled the tub with scalding hot water and sank into it, staring at the whirls of steam rising to the ceiling. My phone was on the edge of the sink and it started to buzz. I knew who it was. Julian. I ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. After 5 missed calls, a text message lit up the screen. "You can't ignore me, Nora. I know you're home. Pick up the phone or I'll call him myself." Panic flooded through my veins like ice water.
I scrambled out of the bath, dripping water all over the floor, and grabbed the phone. I called him back, my voice a frantic whisper. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I hissed. "Are you insane? He's right in the other room." Julian's voice was calm, almost amused. It made me sick. "I miss you," he said. "You've been avoiding me for 2 days. I want to see you." "I can't do this right now," I said, my voice cracking. "There's something I need to tell you." "I know about the pregnancy." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. The air in my lungs turned to lead. "What? How? How could you possibly know that?" "I was following you," he said, as casually as if he were telling me what he had for lunch. "You looked scared. You ran into a CVS like the hounds of hell were after you, and came out looking like you'd seen a ghost. I'm not an idiot, Nora, and I know you. I know you better than he ever will. So what are you going to do? Are you going to tell him? Are you going to tell him that the child you're carrying is mine?" The word mine hung in the air like a bomb. I had never confirmed it was his. I didn't know. But the certainty in his voice was chilling. He wanted it to be his. He wanted to stake a claim on me, on my body, on my future. It was a possessiveness that felt less like love and more like ownership. "I don't know whose it is," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "And I don't know what I'm going to do." "You're going to leave him," Julian said. "You're going to leave Alex and you're going to come to me. It's the only logical choice. Look at your life, Nora. You're bored out of your mind. You're suffocating. You come to me for air, and then you go back into the cage. It's pathetic." His words were like knives. He was twisting the truth, using the very secrets I had shared with him in moments of vulnerable intimacy against me.
I had told him about my frustrations with Alex, the little things that annoyed me, the loss of that initial spark. I'd never told him I didn't love Alex. I loved him more than anything, maybe even more than I loved myself at this point. But love in a marriage isn't always a roaring fire. Sometimes it's a slow burn, a steady, comforting heat that you take for granted until you step too close to a wildfire and realize you're about to get incinerated. That was what Julian was. He was the wildfire. He was the forest fire that promised to burn away all the dead wood, but he was going to take the whole forest with it. I hung up on him. I sat on the cold tile floor of the bathroom, dripping wet and shivering, and I tried to formulate a plan. I had to get rid of the evidence. The test was in my purse. I took it out, wrapped it in a wad of toilet paper, and buried it at the bottom of the kitchen trash can. I'd have to take the trash out in the morning, before Alex had a chance to see it. It was a stupid, temporary solution, but it was all I had. I couldn't think straight. I was drowning in a sea of what-ifs. For the rest of that week, I functioned on autopilot. I went to work, I smiled at my colleagues, I completed my assignments, I even managed to laugh at a joke during a meeting. On the outside, I was Nora, the reliable graphic designer. On the inside, I was a haunted shell of a woman, constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping every time my phone buzzed. Julian's texts became a steady stream of poison. He'd send me photos of his apartment, his bed, implying that I should be there. He'd send long, rambling paragraphs about how he was going to marry me and give my child a better life than Alex ever could. The obsession was escalating, and I was trapped in a corner I had painted myself into. Then Thursday night, everything imploded. I was in the living room, pretending to read a book, while Alex was in the den watching a basketball game. I heard him yell, "Honey, can you come here?" There was an edge to his voice I'd never heard before. My blood ran cold. I walked into the den, my feet like lead weights. He was standing in front of his laptop, his face pale and rigid, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. His eyes, the warm brown eyes I had fallen in love with, were cold and hollow, staring at the screen. "Who's Julian?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. My heart stopped. "What are you talking about?" I stammered, my mind racing 1,000,000 miles a minute. He turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was my email, open to the spam folder. Julian had sent me an email. He had sent it to my work address, but he must have found my personal one. The subject line was, "The truth about our love." The email was a manifesto. It was a history of our affair, written in lurid, excruciating detail, attached with a photo of us at a restaurant, a photo I didn't even know existed. It was a devastating, brutal confession, and Julian had sent it to me, knowing Alex would find it. He had detonated the bomb from a safe distance, destroying my marriage while standing in the ruins with a smile on his face. He had taken the choice away from me. He had forced my hand. I looked at Alex, and for the first time in my life, I saw him look at me not with love, but with disgust. Answer me, Nora. Who the hell is Julian? I opened my mouth to lie, to say he was a coworker, a crazy stalker, anything, but the words wouldn't come. The truth, the ugly, wretched truth, was finally out, and there was no shoving it back into the box. The foundation of my entire life crumbled beneath my feet in a single, deafening moment of silence. I didn't answer him. I couldn't. The words were stuck in my throat, a tangled knot of lies and half-truths that had finally choked me into silence. Alex's face was a mask of pure devastation, and I watched as the realization washed over him in waves.
First came the confusion, then the dawning horror, and finally, the cold, hard steel of betrayal settling into his eyes. He looked at me like I was a stranger, like I was someone who had broken into his house and stolen his most prized possession. In a way, that's exactly what I had done. I had broken into our marriage, and I had stolen his trust. He slammed the laptop shut, the sound cracking through the room like a gunshot. "I asked you a question," he said, his voice trembling with a fury he was barely containing. "Who is Julian?" I took a step back, my hands instinctively flying up in a gesture of surrender. "Alex, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" he shouted, his voice finally breaking. "Explain the pictures? Explain the emails? Explain why my wife is having an affair with some architect she met at a fucking work meeting?" He was pacing now, running his hands through his hair, a gesture I knew meant he was trying to hold himself together. "How long, Nora? How long has this been going on?" I couldn't lie anymore. It was over. The game was up. 6 months, I whispered, my voice barely audible. He stopped pacing and stared at me, his mouth hanging open. 6 months? He repeated, incredulous. "You've been lying to me for 6 months? You've been coming home to me, sleeping next to me, laughing with me, for 6 months, while you were with someone else?" The disgust in his voice was palpable, a physical thing that hit me like a slap. I knew something was off. I knew it. But I thought it was work stress. I thought you were tired. I thought you needed space. I tried to give you space, Nora. I tried to be patient. And all this time you were... He couldn't even finish the sentence. He walked over to the window, his back to me, his shoulders heaving. I could see him trying to compose himself, trying to process the impossible. I wanted to go to him, to touch him, to beg for forgiveness. But I knew my touch was the last thing he wanted. I had polluted everything. "It's not just the affair," I said, my voice trembling. I was digging my own grave, but I had to tell him the truth, all of it. "There's something else, something you need to know." He turned around, his eyes red-rimmed. "What else could there possibly be, Nora? What could possibly be worse than this?" I took a deep breath. The words felt like shards of glass coming up my throat. "I'm pregnant," I said, "and I don't know if it's yours or his." The silence that followed was the worst sound I have ever heard. It was a vacuum, a void where all the hope in the world used to live. Alex stared at me, his face going pale, his eyes wide with a horror that I had put there. He looked like a man who had just been told he was dying. In a way, he had been. The life we had built together, the future we had dreamed about, it was all dying right there in our den, in the house we had called home. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just stood there, frozen, processing the magnitude of the betrayal. Then, without a word, he walked out of the room. I heard him go into the bedroom, heard the sound of drawers opening and closing. He was packing. The realization hit me like a freight train.
but you don't love me. You can't love someone and do what you did. You can't love someone and lie to them every single day for 6 months. You can't love someone and let them sleep next to you while you're carrying another man's baby." The words were a knife twisting in my chest. He was right. He was so right. I had been so consumed by the thrill of the affair, by the excitement of feeling desired, that I had forgotten what real love looked like. Real love wasn't the fire of the affair. It was the steady warmth of a shared life, the comfort of a familiar touch, the safety of coming home to someone who knew you better than you knew yourself. And I had thrown it all away for a cheap, fleeting thrill. "Where will you go?" I asked, my voice small. "I don't know," he said, zipping up his bag. "I'll figure it out. I just need to get out of here. I can't look at you right now, Nora. I can't breathe in this house." He slung the duffel bag over his shoulder and walked past me. I reached out to grab his arm, but he shook me off. "Don't," he said, his voice harsh. "Don't touch me. Don't call me. Don't text me. I need time. I need space. I need to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do with the rest of my life now that everything I thought I had is a lie." He walked out the front door. I heard his car start, heard the tires squeal as he pulled out of the driveway, and then there was nothing but silence. I sank to the floor in the hallway, my legs giving out beneath me, and I cried. I cried for the loss of my husband, for the destruction of my marriage, for the mess I had made of my life. I cried for the baby growing inside me, a baby that might not even be my husband's. I cried for the innocent little creature who would be born into this chaos, into a world where its mother was a liar and its father was either a stranger or a man who had just walked out the door. Hours passed.
I don't know how long I sat there on the cold hardwood floor, Gouda curled up beside me, his head resting in my lap. The house felt empty, hollow, like a tomb. Every corner held a memory, every photograph a reminder of the happiness I had destroyed. The silence was suffocating. At some point, I managed to drag myself to the couch. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the last 6 months in my head. The first kiss, the first lie, the first time I came home and kissed Alex with Julian's taste still on my lips. I felt like I was drowning, like I was buried alive in the weight of my own sins. Morning came, pale and gray, filtering through the blinds like a judgment. I didn't move. I couldn't. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. I knew it was Julian. He had done this. He had sent that email, knowing exactly what it would do. He had burned my life to the ground and was now waiting for me to come crawling to him. I hated him. I hated him with a ferocity I had never felt for anyone in my life. He had taken my choice away. He had decided for me that my marriage was over, and he had done it in the most brutal, cowardly way possible. But I also knew I couldn't hide from him forever. He was relentless. He would keep calling, keep texting, keep showing up until I faced him. So, after hours of lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I would go see him. I would tell him to his face that it was over, that what we had was a mistake, that I would never be with him. I would end it once and for all. And then I would figure out how to get my husband back. If I could get him back. If he would ever want me again. The drive to Julian's apartment felt like a death march. The city was waking up, the streets filling with people starting their day, oblivious to the war raging inside me. I parked in the garage, my hands shaking as I took the elevator up to his floor.
I knocked on his door, bracing myself for the confrontation. He opened it with a smug smile on his face, wearing nothing but a pair of sweatpants. He looked like he had just woken up, like he hadn't spent the night destroying someone's life. "Nora," he said,
his voice dripping with false sympathy. "I'm so glad you came. I was worried about you." "Don't," I said, pushing past him into the apartment. "Don't you dare pretend to care about me. You knew what you were doing. You knew that email would ruin my marriage. You wanted this." He closed the door behind me and leaned against it, crossing his arms. "Of course I wanted this," he said, his tone turning cold. "I wanted you, Nora, all of you. I was tired of sharing you with him. I was tired of being your dirty little secret. I want to be the one you come home to. I want to be the one who holds you at night. I want to be the father of your child. Is that really so wrong?" I stared at him, the man I had risked everything for, and I saw him clearly for the first time. He wasn't charming. He was manipulative. He wasn't passionate. He was possessive. He didn't love me. He loved the idea of owning me. I felt a wave of revulsion wash over me, so strong I almost gagged. "It's over," I said, my voice steady despite the shaking in my hands. "Whatever we had, it's over. I'm going to try to fix my marriage. I'm going to be a better wife. I'm going to be a better person, and I want you to stay away from me, forever." Julian laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You really think he's going to take you back?" he said, shaking his head. "You really think he's going to raise a child that might not be his? You're delusional, Nora. He's gone. I saw you. He packed a bag and left. He's not coming back. And even if he did, you'll never be able to trust him again. He'll always wonder if you're lying. He'll always wonder if you're seeing someone else. You killed your marriage, Nora. You killed it dead. And now you have nothing." His words hit me like a physical blow. He was right. I had killed my marriage. I had done it with my own hands. But that didn't mean I had to let him be the victor. I straightened my spine, looked him in the eye, and said the words I should have said months ago. "Maybe I did kill my marriage," I said, "and maybe I can't fix it. But I'm not going to be with you, Julian. I'm not going to let you win. I'm going to figure out how to live with the mess I made, but I'm going to do it without you." His expression shifted from smugness to rage. "You can't do this," he said, stepping toward me. "You can't just walk away. I have power over you, Nora. I have pictures. I have texts. I have everything. If you leave me, I'll destroy you. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of woman you really are. Your family, your friends, your bosses. I'll make your life a living hell." I looked at him, this man I had once thought was exciting and passionate, and I saw him for what he really was. A bully, a coward, a man who had to tear others down to feel powerful. "Do it," I said, my voice cold. "Send the pictures. Tell everyone. I don't care anymore. I've already lost everything that matters. I lost my husband. I lost my self-respect. I don't have anything left for you to take." I turned and walked out of his apartment. He called after me, shouting threats, but I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove away, my heart pounding, my hands shaking, but my resolve stronger than it had been in months. I had finally ended it. I had finally chosen something. It might not be the right choice. It might be the choice that leaves me alone and broken, but it was mine. The weeks that followed were a study in solitary confinement. I stayed in the house that now felt like a museum of a life I no longer deserved. Alex hadn't come back. He hadn't called. He hadn't texted. I didn't expect him to. I had given him every reason to walk away, and I had to live with the consequences. The silence was my new roommate, a constant, oppressive presence that filled every room. Gouda was my only comfort, his warm, furry body pressed against mine at night, his loyal eyes looking at me with a love I didn't deserve. I went through the motions of living, but I was dead inside. The pregnancy was a constant, nagging reminder of my betrayal. My body was changing, the nausea a daily punishment, the weight gain a physical manifestation of my sin. I went to the doctor alone. I sat in the waiting room, surrounded by happy couples holding hands, their faces glowing with anticipation. I felt like an imposter, a fraud who had no right to be there. The doctor confirmed the pregnancy, estimated I was about 10 weeks along. She asked me about my husband, about my support system. I lied.
I said he was traveling for work. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. I couldn't bear to see the judgment in her eyes. I knew I had to make a decision about the baby. I couldn't raise a child alone, not like this. I was a mess, a broken woman with no husband, no future, and no hope. The thought of terminating the pregnancy crossed my mind more than once. It seemed like the logical choice, the cleanest way to deal with the mess I had made. But every time I thought about it, I felt a pang of guilt so sharp it took my breath away. This baby, no matter who its father was innocent. It had done nothing wrong. It was a life, a tiny, helpless life that deserved a chance. I didn't know if I could be the one to take that chance away. I also knew I couldn't have the baby without knowing who the father was. I had to be sure. I had to find out if Alex was the father. If he was, maybe, just maybe, there was a chance he would come back. Not for me, but for the child. It was a desperate hope, a thread I was clinging to in the darkness. I looked up prenatal paternity tests online, procedures that could determine paternity before the baby was born.
They were expensive, invasive, and required a sample from the potential father. There was no way I could ask Alex for that. He wouldn't even talk to me. I was stuck, trapped in limbo, waiting for a sign that would never come. The days turned into weeks. I stopped going to work. I couldn't face my colleagues, couldn't bear to see the pity in their eyes. I knew they had heard. Small office communities are like small towns. Gossip spreads like wildfire. My boss, a kind woman named Diane, called me to check in. I told her I was dealing with a personal crisis, that I needed some time off. She was understanding, but I could hear the concern in her voice. I knew my job was hanging by a thread. I knew I was letting everyone down, but I couldn't summon the energy to care. I spent my days in a haze of self-loathing and regret. I replayed every moment of the affair in my head, analyzing it, dissecting it, trying to understand how I had let it happen. I had been so lonely, so bored, so desperate for excitement that I had thrown away everything that mattered. I had been a fool, a selfish, stupid fool, and now I was paying the price. The only time I felt any semblance of peace was when I was looking through old photo albums, pictures of me and Alex from our early days, when we were young and in love, and the future was an endless horizon of possibilities. Our wedding day, his face full of joy and hope. Our first apartment, cramped and cheap, but we didn't care because we had each other. The day we got Gouda, a scruffy little puppy with big paws and an even bigger heart. We had been so happy, so blissfully, naively happy. I had taken it all for granted, and now it was gone. One night, about 3 weeks after Alex left, I was sitting on the couch, Gouda asleep at my feet, when I heard a knock on the door. My heart leaped into my throat. Could it be him? Could he have come back? I rushed to the door, my hands shaking, and yanked it open. But it wasn't Alex. It was my mother.
She stood in the doorway, her face etched with worry. She was a small woman with silver hair and kind eyes, the kind of woman who had dedicated her life to her family. She was the embodiment of unconditional love, the one person I had always been able to count on. But I had been avoiding her calls. I couldn't face her, couldn't bear to see the disappointment in her eyes. "Mom," I said, my voice cracking. "What are you doing here?" "Your father and I were worried about you," she said, stepping inside and pulling me into a hug. Her embrace was warm and familiar, and I immediately burst into tears. I sobbed into her shoulder, the tears I had been holding back for weeks finally pouring out. She held me, stroking my hair, murmuring soothing words. "It's okay, baby. It's okay. I'm here now." She led me to the couch, sat me down, and listened as I poured out the whole sordid story. The affair, the pregnancy, the end of my marriage. I told her everything. I expected her to judge me, to scold me, to tell how disappointed she was. But she didn't. She just listened, her hand holding mine, her eyes filled with a sadness that broke my heart. "Oh, Nora," she said,
when I was finished, her voice thick with emotion. "I knew something was wrong. I could hear it in your voice on the phone, but I never imagined it was something like this." "I'm sorry, Mom," I said, the tears streaming down my face. "I'm so sorry. I've made such a mess of everything. I don't know how to fix it." She squeezed my hand. "You can't fix the past, honey. You can only move forward. You made a mistake. A terrible, painful mistake. But that doesn't make you a terrible person. You're still my daughter. I still love you. And I'm going to help you get through this." It was the first kind word I had heard in weeks, and it shattered me. I collapsed into her arms, sobbing like a child. She held me for a long time, letting me cry, letting me release the pain that had been building up inside me.
When I finally pulled away, she looked me in the eye. "Now," she said, her voice firm but gentle, "we need to talk about the baby. What are you going to do?" I told her I didn't know. I told her about the paternity test, about the possibility of Alex being the father, about the tiny flicker of hope that refused to die. She listened patiently, nodding along. "If you want to know, you have to ask him," she said. "You have to tell him about the test. You have to give him the chance to decide if he wants to be involved." "He won't talk to me, Mom," I said, my voice breaking. "He won't answer my calls. He won't respond to my texts. He hates me." "Maybe he does," she said, her voice soft but honest. "And maybe he has every right to. But you have to try. Not for yourself, but for the baby. If there's even a chance that Alex is the father, you owe it to him to know, and you owe it to the baby to give them a father." She was right. I knew she was right. I had been hiding, wallowing in my own misery, avoiding the hard conversations. But I couldn't hide forever. I had to face Alex. I had to tell him about the paternity test. I had to give him the choice. It was the only way I could even begin to make things right. The next day, I drove to his office. I didn't call ahead. I knew if I called, I'd lose my nerve. I walked into the lobby, told the receptionist I needed to see him, and waited. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I was terrified. Terrified of what he would say, what he would do, how he would look at me. After what felt like an eternity, he appeared. He looked tired, exhausted, like he hadn't been sleeping. He had lost weight, his clothes hanging loose on his frame. When he saw me, his face hardened, his jaw tightening. He walked over to me, his hands shoved in his pockets, his eyes avoiding mine. "What are you doing here, Nora?" he asked, his voice cold. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Please, Alex. Just give me 5 minutes. I need to tell you something important." He hesitated, his eyes searching my face. Then, with a heavy sigh, he nodded. "Fine. There's a coffee shop across the street. I'll meet you there in 10 minutes. He turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the lobby, my heart in my throat. I walked to the coffee shop, my legs like jelly, and sat down at a table in the corner. I waited, staring at the door, my mind racing. What was I going to say? How was I going to make him understand? Was there any hope left? He arrived 10 minutes later, his expression guarded, his body language closed off. He sat down across from me, not bothering to order anything. He just stared at me, waiting. "Alex," I started, my voice trembling. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I know I've destroyed everything we had. But there's something I need to tell you. Something that might change things." "Just say it, Nora," he said, his voice flat. I took a deep breath. "The baby," I said. "I'm having a prenatal paternity test. I need to know who the father is, and I need you to be a part of it. I need you to take the test." He stared at me, his face unreadable. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. He just sat there, processing my words. Then, slowly, a bitter smile spread across his face. "You want me to take a paternity test?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You want to know if the baby you made with another man is mine?" "Yes," I said, my voice cracking. "I know it's a lot to ask. I know you have every reason to say no. But I have to know, Alex.
I have to know if there's any chance that this baby is yours. Because if it is, I want you to have the chance to be a father. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to take me back. But I owe it to you to know. And I owe it to the baby." He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face with his hands. When he looked at me again, there was something different in his eyes.
Not forgiveness, not even warmth, but something else, something that looked like a crack in the wall he had built around himself. "Fine," he said, his voice heavy. "I'll do it. But not for you, Nora. For the baby. If that child is mine, I have a responsibility. But if it's not, I want you to leave me alone. Permanently." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you, Alex. I know I don't deserve this." "You don't," he said, standing up. "But the baby does. I'll be in touch about the test." He walked out of the coffee shop without looking back, leaving me sitting there, a tangled mess of hope and fear. It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't even a step toward forgiveness. But it was something. It was a chance. And I clung to it like a lifeline in a storm. The next few weeks were a blur of logistical nightmares and emotional landmines. Alex, true to his word, agreed to the prenatal paternity test. The procedure itself was surprisingly clinical, devoid of the drama I had built up in my head. We met at a private clinic in Pasadena, a sterile, beige-walled place that smelled like antiseptic and felt like a waiting room for a verdict that would define the rest of our lives. The doctor was a calm, professional woman who explained the process in a soothing, detached tone. They would take a blood sample from me and a cheek swab from Alex, and the results would be available in about a week. A week. 7 days to wait for the answer to a question that had been eating me alive. Alex and I didn't speak during the appointment. We sat in opposite corners of the waiting room, pretending to be strangers. I couldn't even look at him. The sight of him, so close yet so impossibly far, was a constant aching reminder of everything I had lost. He looked tired, but there was a new hardness in his jaw, a resolve that hadn't been there before. He was doing this because he felt obligated, not because he wanted to be there. I understood that. I accepted it.
It was more than I deserved. When the appointment was over, he walked out without a word. I wanted to call after him, to beg him to stay, to tell him I was sorry for the 1000th time. But I didn't. I had said enough. I had done enough. It was time to let him make his own choices, to let him decide if there was any path forward for us. I drove home alone, the weight of the unknown pressing down on me like a physical force. The week of waiting was a special kind of hell. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I paced the house like a caged animal, my mind spinning with scenarios, each one more devastating than the last. If the baby was Julian's, I would have to raise a child with a man who had proven himself to be a manipulative, controlling monster. I would have to co-parent with someone who had deliberately tried to destroy my life. The thought made me physically ill. But if the baby was Alex's, there was a chance. A tiny, fragile chance that I could rebuild something. Not what we had, maybe not even a marriage, but something. A partnership, a shared responsibility, a future that didn't involve Julian. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. I was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the wall, when my phone rang. I saw the clinic's number on the screen, and my heart stopped. I answered with a trembling hand, my voice barely a whisper. "Hello? Is this Nora?" the doctor's voice asked. "Yes," I said, my pulse pounding in my ears. "I have the results of your paternity test," she said. "I can give them to you over the phone, or you can come in to discuss them in person." I couldn't wait. I couldn't bear another minute of not knowing. "Just tell me," I said, my voice cracking. "Please, just tell me." There was a pause, a long, agonizing pause, and then she said the words that would change everything. "The test confirms that Alex is the biological father of your child." The air left my lungs in a rush. I sank back into the couch, tears streaming down my face. It was Alex. The baby was Alex's.
The child I was carrying, the innocent life growing inside me, was his. I felt a surge of relief so powerful it almost knocked me unconscious. But it was followed immediately by a wave of guilt. This baby, this beautiful, perfect baby, was a product of a marriage I had almost destroyed. I had almost taken away Alex's chance to be a father, had almost condemned him to a life of wondering if a child was his own. The guilt was a crushing weight, but the relief was even greater. I called Alex immediately. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail, my voice shaking with emotion. Alex, it's me. I got the results. The baby is yours. The baby is yours, Alex. I know this doesn't fix anything. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but you need it to know. You need it to know that you're going to be a father. I hung up, my heart pounding. I didn't expect him to call back. I didn't expect anything from him. But I had done what I had to do. I had given him the truth. What he did with it was up to him. The next few days were a quiet, empty limbo. I went through the motions of living, but my mind was elsewhere, constantly waiting, hoping, praying for a sign from Alex. I didn't hear from him. I assumed he needed time to process, to decide what he wanted to do. I tried to give him space, but it was agonizing. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leaped into my throat. Every time I saw a car that looked like his, I felt a flicker of hope, but it was always a false alarm. He was staying away. Then, one evening, about a week after I had left the voicemail, I was in the kitchen making a pathetic attempt at dinner when I heard a knock at the door. My heart stopped. I walked to the door, my hands shaking, and opened it. It was Alex. He stood on the doorstep, looking uncertain, his hands shoved in the pockets of his jacket. He looked tired, but there was something different in his eyes, something that looked like the beginning of a thaw. "Can I come in?"
He asked, his voice quiet. I stepped aside, my voice caught in my throat. He walked into the house, looking around at the familiar surroundings. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. He stood in the living room, his back to me, his shoulders tense. "I got your message," he said, still not turning around. "I've been thinking about it, about us, about everything." I walked toward him, stopping a few feet away. "Alex, I know I don't have any right to ask for anything. I know I've destroyed everything. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you, if you'll let me." He turned around, his eyes meeting mine. There was a pain in them that I had put there, a wound that would never fully heal. But there was something else, too, something that looked like the faintest glimmer of hope. "I can't promise you anything, Nora," he said, his voice thick. "I can't promise I'll ever be able to trust you again. I can't promise I'll ever be able to forgive you, but I'm willing to try. For the baby. For us. I'm willing to try." The words hit me like a wave, a tsunami of emotion that I couldn't contain. I collapsed into his arms, sobbing, my face buried in his chest. He held me, his arms wrapped around me, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a miracle. It was just a beginning, a fragile, uncertain beginning, but it was everything. That night, Alex stayed, not because he wanted to, not because he was ready to forgive me, but because we had a child on the way, and we needed to figure out how to navigate the impossible mess we were in. He slept on the couch, which felt like a punishment and a mercy all at once. I lay in our bed, the bed we had shared for years, and I stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds of him shifting on the pull-out sofa in the living room. The house felt different with him in it.
It felt alive again, humming with a tension that was almost electric. It wasn't the comfortable, easy silence we used to share. It was a loaded silence, thick with everything we weren't saying. But it was something. it was a start. The days that followed were a delicate, exhausting dance. We tiptoed around each other, careful not to step on the landmines of our shared history. We talked about logistics, about the baby, about doctor's appointments and nursery plans, and all the practical things that needed to be done. We didn't talk about us. We didn't talk about Julian. We didn't talk about the affair. It was like we had decided, silently, that the past was a country we weren't ready to visit. We were living in the present, trying to build a future, and the past was a ghost that haunted the edges of every conversation. Alex went back to work. I went back to work. We fell into a routine that was almost normal, if you ignored the elephant in the room. He would come home in the evenings, and we would have dinner together, talking about our days, about the baby, about anything but the thing that was breaking us apart. We watched TV together, sitting on opposite ends of the couch, Gouda between us like a furry buffer. We went to the grocery store together, navigating the aisles like two strangers who had been forced into an uncomfortable partnership. It was strange. It was painful. But it was progress. The pregnancy was advancing, and my body was changing in ways that were impossible to ignore. I was showing now, a small, round bump that was a constant reminder of the life growing inside me. Alex started coming to the doctor's appointments with me. He sat in the waiting room, his face a mask of stoic calm, and he listened to the heartbeat, watched the ultrasound, asked the questions I was too emotional to ask. He was going through the motions of being a father, even if he wasn't sure he was ready to be a husband. I watched him, and I felt a love for him so profound it hurt. I had almost lost him. I had almost thrown away the best thing that had ever happened to me. And now, by some miracle, he was here. Not whole, not healed, but here. Julian was a shadow that lingered on the periphery of my life. He had been quiet since that day in his apartment, but I knew it wouldn't last. He wasn't the type to let go easily. I had changed my number, blocked him on social media, done everything I could to cut him out of my life, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. I started looking over my shoulder again, jumping at shadows, my anxiety spiking every time I saw a car that looked like his. I didn't tell Alex. He had enough to deal with. I didn't want to burden him with my fears. I was trying to prove to him that I could handle my own mess, that I could be the strong, reliable partner he deserved. One evening, about a month after Alex had moved back into the house, I came home from work to find him sitting at the kitchen table, his laptop open in front of him. His face was pale, his jaw tight. My heart sank. I knew that look. Something was wrong. "What happened?" I asked, dropping my bag on the floor. He turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was, "The truth about Nora." My stomach dropped. I knew who it was from before I even read the first word. Julian. He had found a way to reach Alex again. He was relentless. I walked over to the table, my legs feeling like lead, and I read the email. It was a long, rambling, accusatory screed, detailing every moment of our affair. But it wasn't just the affair. It was a twisted narrative of how I had been planning to leave Alex, how I had been using him for financial security, how I had been laughing at him behind his back. It was all lies, of course, but they were lies wrapped in just enough truth to be believable.
Julian had painted a picture of me as a cold, calculating villain, and he had sent it to the one person whose opinion mattered most. "Alex," I said, my voice trembling, "this isn't true. None of it is true. You know that, right? You know I never planned to leave you. You know I never used you. I made a terrible mistake, but I never stopped loving you. I never stopped wanting to be with you." He didn't look at me. He just stared at the screen, his expression unreadable. "He sent pictures, Nora," he said, his voice flat. "Pictures of you two together. Pictures of you laughing, smiling, looking happier than you've looked with me in years." Tears welled in my eyes. "Those were lies, Alex. He took them out of context. He was manipulating me, just like he's manipulating you now.
He's trying to destroy us. Don't let him win." He finally looked at me, and the pain in his eyes was unbearable. "How do I know, Nora? How do I know what's real and what's not? You lied to me for 6 months. You told me you loved me while you were sleeping with another man. How am I supposed to trust anything you say?" The question hung in the air, a knife that cut through the fragile peace we had been building. He was right. I had given him every reason to doubt me. My words meant nothing now. I had to show him, through my actions, that I was worthy of his trust. But how? How do you prove you're trustworthy when you've already proven you're a liar? I sank into the chair across from him, my hands clasped in my lap, my heart pounding. "I can't make you trust me, Alex. I know that. I've broken something that can't be fixed overnight. But I can promise you this. I will never lie to you again. I will never keep anything from you again. I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that I am worthy of your trust. And if you give me the chance, I will show you that the woman you fell in love with is still here. She's just broken, and she needs your help to heal."
He was silent for a long time, his eyes searching mine. I could see the war raging inside him, the battle between the man who wanted to trust me and the man who had been burned too many times. Finally, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Julian is a threat," he said, his voice low. "He's not going to stop. He's going to keep coming after us, keep trying to tear us apart. We need to deal with him. Legally, we need to file a restraining order. We need to make it clear that he can't contact us anymore." I nodded, relief washing over me. He was talking about us. He was still in this. He was still fighting for our marriage. "I'll do whatever it takes," I said. "I'll go to the police. I'll file the report. I'll do whatever I need to do to keep him away from us." And I did. The next day, we went to the police station together. We filed a report detailing Julian's harassment, his threats, his relentless pursuit. The officer who took our statement was sympathetic, but she warned us that restraining orders were hard to enforce, that Julian might find ways to get around it. I didn't care. It was a start. It was a line in the sand. The weeks that followed were a slow, painful journey toward healing. Alex and I started going to couples therapy. It was awkward at first, uncomfortable, both of us reluctant to open up to a stranger about the intimate details of our failure. But slowly, hesitantly, we started to talk. We talked about the affair, about what had led me to seek comfort in another man's arms. We talked about Alex's distance, his emotional unavailability, the way he had made me feel invisible. We talked about my selfishness, my weakness, my desperate need for validation. It was hard. It was brutal. It was the most honest we had been with each other in years. Therapy helped. It gave us a language to talk about the things we had been avoiding. It helped me understand why I had done what I did, even if it didn't excuse it.
It helped Alex understand that his own emotional walls had contributed to the distance between us. It wasn't about blame. It was about understanding, and it gave us a path forward. The baby was growing, and with each passing week, I felt more connected to the life inside me. I was going to be a mother. Alex was going to be a father. We were going to be parents, even if we weren't sure we were going to be a couple. The focus shifted from the past to the future. We started planning for the baby. We painted the nursery, a soft, calming shade of blue. We picked out a crib, a stroller, a car seat. We argued over names, laughed over the ridiculous baby gadgets we were convinced we needed. It was almost normal. It was almost happy. But the shadow of Julian was still there, lurking in the background. I knew he wasn't done with us. I knew he was biding his time, waiting for the right moment to strike. And I was right. About 6 months into the pregnancy, I was at home, alone, when I heard a knock at the door. I assumed it was Alex, home early from work. I opened the door without checking the peephole, and my heart stopped. It was Julian. He was standing on my doorstep, looking disheveled and wild-eyed. His clothes were rumpled, his hair a mess.
He looked like he hadn't slept in days. The moment I saw him, I knew he was dangerous. There was something unhinged in his eyes, something desperate and unhinged. "Nora," he said, his voice a harsh whisper, "I need to talk to you. Please, just give me 5 minutes." I tried to shut the door, but he shoved his foot in the way, blocking it. "Get away from me, Julian," I said, my voice shaking. "You're not supposed to be here. I'll call the police." He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "The police? They can't help you, Nora. They can't protect you from me. I've lost everything because of you. My job, my reputation, my sanity. You ruined my life, and now you're going to pay." I was terrified, my heart pounding in my chest. I reached into my pocket, fumbling for my phone. I knew I had to call for help, but before I could dial, he reached out and grabbed my arm, his grip painfully tight. "Let go of me," I screamed, struggling against him. He pulled me toward him, his face inches from mine. "You're not going to have this baby with him, Nora. You're not going to have his child. That baby is mine. It was always mine. And I'm going to make sure you never forget it." The sound of a car screeching in the driveway broke the spell. Alex, he was home. He had heard me screaming. The car door slammed, and then Alex was there, running toward us, his face contorted with rage. "Get away from her!" he shouted, his voice thunderous. Julian let go of me, and I stumbled back, my heart racing. Alex was on him in an instant, throwing a punch that connected with Julian's jaw. Julian stumbled, caught off guard, and Alex hit him again. I had never seen Alex like this, so raw, so primal. He was defending me. He was fighting for me. The police arrived a few minutes later. Neighbors had heard the commotion and called them. Julian was arrested. He was charged with violating the restraining order and assault. He was taken away in handcuffs, his eyes filled with a hatred that would haunt me for years. Alex and I stood on the front lawn, wrapped in each other's arms, shaking from the adrenaline. He held me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I thought I was going to lose you," he whispered into my hair. "I thought I was going to lose you both." "You didn't," I said, my voice broken. "We're still here. We're still together. We're going to be okay." And in that moment, I believed it. The nightmare was over. Julian was behind bars, at least for now. We had survived. We had faced the worst and come out the other side. It wasn't a happy ending. It was a new beginning, a fragile, uncertain beginning, but it was ours.
কার বাসরে ঘুমাও তুমি, কার নিয়ে চলো, আমায় রেখে কেন প্রিয়া গিয়াছ রে বলো। কার বাসরে ঘুমাও তুমি, কার নিয়ে চলো, আমায় রেখে কেন প্রিয়া গিয়াছ রে বলো। কার মনেতে তোমার আশা রাখো জমা করে, আমার আশা পইরা দিয়া তুমি রইলা দূরে। স্বার্থবাদী প্রিয়া রে তুই, স্বার্থবাদী তুই, তোর মনেতে ছিল হাইরে চলো নারী সুর। স্বার্থবাদী প্রিয়া রে তুই, স্বার্থবাদী তুই, তোর মনেতে ছিল হাইরে চলো নারী সুর। আসলে ভালো বললে রে তুই আশা গুলো দিয়ে, চইলা গেলে কষ্ট দিয়া নতুন সাথী নিয়ে। বাসলে ভালো বললে রে তুই আশা গুলো দিয়ে, চইলা গেলে কষ্ট দিয়া নতুন সাথী নিয়ে। তোর প্রেমেরই মন্ত্র ছিল অভিনয়ের জাল, তোর কথা বিশ্বাস কইরা হইল আমার কাল। স্বার্থবাদী প্রিয়া রে তুই, স্বার্থবাদী তুই, তোর মনেতে ছিল হাইরে চলো নারী সুর। স্বার্থবাদী প্রিয়া রে তুই, স্বার্থবাদী তুই, তোর মনেতে ছিল হাইরে চলো নারী সুর। কার মনেতে বাসা বাঁধো আমায় রেখে রে, কার মুখেতে ফুটাও হাসি আমায় কাঁদিয়ে। কার মনেতে বাসা বাঁধো আমায় রেখে রে, কার মুখেতে ফুটাও হাসি আমায় কাঁদিয়ে। স্বার্থ নিয়া করলে খেলায় আমার সাথে রে, পর ভাবিয়া দূরে গেলে আমায় রেখে রে। স্বার্থবাদী প্রিয়া রে তুই, স্বার্থবাদী তুই, তোর মনেতে ছিল হাইরে চলো নারী সুর। স্বার্থবাদী প্রিয়া রে তুই, স্বার্থবাদী তুই, তোর মনেতে ছিল